What's up, guys? Today I want to talk a bit about the state of NASCAR and also the big news today that occurred. But before I get to that, I want to tell you guys about something that happened this morning, and it does tie in with what I'm going to talk about. I was walking by a cemetery, and I hear this spinning sound, this high winding spinning sound. And I look over the fence into the cemetery. I don't see anybody. I don't see anything. So I decide to go around and go in to the cemetery. And I'm following this high winding spinning sound. And I'm following the sound, and it's getting louder and it's getting louder as I walk by all these tombstones. And I finally get to a spot where the sound is really loud, and I could literally feel a tremble on my feet. So this sound is coming from beneath the ground. So I creep up to a tombstone where this sound seems to be coming from, right underneath this tombstone. As I walk around to see this tombstone, lo and behold, there's a familiar name on that tombstone. That name is Bill France Sr. And that high winding sound that was coming from underneath that ground, right beneath my feet, was the sound of Bill France Sr. turning over in his grave. And it was happening at such a loud and high rate of speed that I bet if you can hook up a tachometer to that tombstone, you'd probably read 10,000 RPM. So what does that have to do with anything going on today? Well, his grandson, as if he didn't do enough to embarrass the family name and the legacy left behind by his grandfather and even his father before him, decides he's gonna get drunk, go driving, and get busted for DUI. Not only was he 2 times over the legal limit, but he also had oxycodone on him. So this isn't just somebody who was smoking weed. These prescription drugs are no joke. This is some serious, hard shit. So I wasn't absolutely shocked, because these rich people are no different than anyone else. There's nothing special about them. They just have more money. But he got arrested. And apparently he started dropping all kinds of names and reminding the police of who he was. Because apparently he felt, don't they know who I am? Well, the problem is he was arrested in New York. This isn't exactly NASCAR country. I'm one of the few NASCAR fans that I know of that live here in New York. But apparently he feels that he's such a big shot that these guys should have known who he was and just let him go. As if that wasn't enough, he then starts name-dropping Donald Trump, because they're close friends. And apparently that was supposed to help. But at that point, it really didn't matter. He was already under arrest. And so the story goes on from there. Everybody knows now. He was arrested for DUI and possession of oxycodone. So, okay, the CEO of NASCAR embarrassed himself embarrass the sport, embarrass the family name. And that's why you hear that loud spinning sound coming from Bill Francis' grave. Because he knows, and he probably knew for a long time, that his grandson is a huge fuck up. But we already knew that at this point. So there's not much else to say about that particular story. He's been arrested. Now we move on to the topic at hand, which is the state of NASCAR and what happens from this point forward. I don't know what happened to all the rumors about NASCAR being up for sale. Wasn't that long ago there were rumors, and it kind of died off. I haven't really heard anything else. But at this point, if anyone had any hopes that this guy was going to do anything positive for the sport of NASCAR, this is the point where you get to jump ship and be like, enough's enough. You should have been there already, but you know, if you were a holdout, this is it. This is the time to just be like, fuck this guy. I don't want, I want this guy gone. Now the thing is, he's the CEO. I suppose there's a board of directors that can actively fire him. And maybe the reason they haven't done so to this point is because, yeah, he's Brian France. He inherited the legacy that his grandfather and father continued on. It's not, something they're going to actively look to do, no matter how incompetent he's been, which he has been. He hasn't really done much to improve or grow the sport, which is a huge problem. So he doesn't even seem to be have any interest in being CEO. It's like he inherited this and he's just like milking it for what it's worth and not really doing anything to keep the sport viable. So we know he's terrible at this point. There's no point in beating a dead horse, but the point is now maybe something good can come out of this. Now those holdouts who had an opportunity to get rid of Brian France, now this is the moment. This is it. He's given you the opportunity on a silver platter to fire him or ask him kindly to step down, and hopefully somebody else can take over who actually gives a fuck about the sport. The sport is really in dire straits, and I can tell you from firsthand experience going to these races, there are problems that are right in your face. Now, I used to go to Dover twice a year. And when I first started going to those races, you had to have tickets many months in advance as soon as they were available. And you had to go there at least the day before. If you tried to go there on the same day, you were going to be stuck in horrendous traffic. It was just a nightmare because the place was jam-packed. Now, Dover holds about 400,000 people. Don't quote me, but that's a lot of fucking people. And now you go, right back then, every seat was filled. You could hardly move around that place. Now, and it's been this way for a while now, the place is so empty, even for a cup race. They've taken and they've put banners covering huge sections of the racetrack, of the seats, because they cannot sell those seats. So now you have these gigantic banners that are just covering empty seats. So it doesn't look as bad. And maybe they could get a couple bucks for the advertisement. That's pretty sad. And this really started not long after Brian France took over as CEO. Didn't happen overnight. It was still going pretty strong when he took over. Because it doesn't, change doesn't happen overnight, but, it coincided with his takeover. Eventually, the economy crash did have a lot to do with it, but they've had plenty of chances to bring everything back. You can't blame everything on the economy anymore. But what has Brian France done about this problem with the falling attendance, the falling ratings? This was once probably the most popular sport in the country. He hasn't done anything. If anything, he sat by and allowed certain things to happen right in front of him and just didn't do anything about it. He's allowed Cup drivers to destroy the Truck and Xfinity series. Those series are not worth watching. They're embarrassing in terms of attendance. And this idea that he was one of the people that would come out and be like, well, people want to go and see Kyle Busch and all these names in the smaller series. And these other drivers want to race against the best. Turns out he was wrong. Because where are all these people? Why don't they come and support these races? Because people don't want to watch garbage. They don't want to watch people from the Cup Series come in and dominate a bunch of kids trying to make a name for themselves. Nobody wants to watch that. And to this day, he's hardly done anything about it. Now, NASCAR has implemented a limit to how many races they can run. If it was up to me, you're not allowed to run any fucking races. If you're a Cup guy, if you're a Cup regular, you fucking stay in the Cup Series. Or step down. You want to go down and dominate the lower series, then do that. But you can't be in Cup. You can't just do this. I would put an end to it. Because this idea that it sells tickets and people want to see this, it's already been proven to be bullshit. But he stood by Brian France and allowed this to happen. Nobody cares about trucks or Xfinity anymore. Nobody. It's a joke. And I've been talking about this for a long time, and they're letting the Cup drivers stink up the show. So that's one big problem they have, because as a fan, don't really have these younger drivers that you can kind of grow up with and follow as they start from a very young age and as they go up the series from one series to the next. And you can say, hey, I followed this guy's entire career and I remember. And yeah, you could still do that, but it's not. Who wants to watch these kids get get spanked by these Cup drivers? Which, by the way, I wouldn't have a problem with Cup drivers competing in these lower series if they actually drove substandard equipment. Don't come there and then ask me to be impressed by Kyle Busch dominating races when he's driving the best fucking car in the field every week. That's not impressive to me. And if you were to take a poll and ask all these other drivers, these young kids, they'll fucking tell you. They're not going to go on record and say it because it looks bad. Nobody wants to come and say, I don't want to race Kyle Busch when he's racing in a Gibbs car and I'm getting spanked. That's not fun. And I'm fighting to stay on the lead lap. I don't want that. Nobody's going to admit that. It makes them look bad. So that's one huge problem. And if you don't take care of the lower series, then it just trickles down to everything else. The Cup Series is going to feel some of the effect of that as well. You gotta take care of everything from the ground up. So that's one thing, right? And Brian France never did anything about it. And the other big, huge failure is expansion. He hasn't done anything to expand NASCAR as a sport to other markets and other communities. Till this day, NASCAR is still largely a southern sport. You go to these races, as I do go to races, I see it with my own eyes. 99% of the people at these races are older white folks. Okay? Now, listen to what I'm saying before you catch a heart attack or you start accusing me of this or that. I'm telling you the God's honest truth. The vast majority of people who show up to these races are old white people. What's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have anything against that. The problem is that where's the expansion? Why don't we see a more diversity? Why don't we see younger people at these races? And the young people you see there are there with their grandparents or their parents. So NASCAR has remained a sport sort of for these southern white folks and their kids. And those are the ones inheriting the love of the sport because they grew up in it. But these people are dying off. And what are you replacing these fans with? You're not even trying. So these people are just going to die off. And what are you hoping that there's enough of their kids and their grandkids who are going to inherit that love of the sport and attend these races and support NASCAR? That's insane. You have to expand. That's how the NBA became big, because they went global. They didn't just sit back and just left things the way they were. They expanded their appeal to not just the entire country, to the world. Everyone around the world follows the NBA. That's why it's popular. Brian France hasn't done a fucking thing about expanding to other communities outside of the typical southern sport that his grandfather built the sport on. And I guarantee you that if his grandfather was still alive today, he would never have allowed this to happen, because he understood the value of expanding and appealing to a wider market. He didn't want to just keep the sport in a couple of tracks around the South. So I can guarantee you that he would be incredibly disappointed in what's going on. But this is what happens when you inherit something that you didn't build. And this is a bigger issue than just with Brian France. You can see this in everyday life. You see these wealthy people who inherited a fortune, and they walk around and act as if they built everything when they inherited it. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? If I was Brian France, I inherited this, I would say, you know what? My heart's not in it. I don't feel the passion that my grandfather or my father had for this sport, for running this sport and making sure that it thrives. I don't have it. I'm passionate about something else. Maybe he wants to go make shoes. I don't know. But his heart was never in it. This is something he inherited. He was the heir to this fortune and this dynasty. And he didn't have the good sense to say, this isn't for me. Let's find someone who has that passion that my grandfather and my father had for the sport. And I want to let them be in charge. Right? You'd still have a fortune. You still have the France name. You can go do something else. But if being the CEO of a corporation, a corporate entity, a sport, that's a lot of responsibility. And if your heart isn't in it, if you don't have the passion to do what it takes, then it's best to get out. There are plenty of viable candidates who can step in and understand the problems that are inherent in the sport today, like the things I'm talking about, and could say, you know what, I have ideas. This is what I would do to help expand things, and we need to expand. Because now this sport is literally dying because there just aren't enough people who are the only people that are still kind of hanging on are these older white folks who grew up with a love of the sport. But what happens when they die off? NASCAR is not ready for what's coming. So what is the appeal to people who aren't born into this love of the sport? I wasn't born into it. I'm Hispanic. I'm from New York. But my love of cars, and I grew up working on cars, it just naturally, I love cars. I love racing. It just happened to be something I gravitated to. But it wasn't like I was, my father or grandfather was a huge NASCAR fan and took me to races as a kid. I don't have that story. A lot of fans have that. That's their story. I don't have that. But I am an exception. I'm not the rule. You have to expand and be appealing to a wider audience. And I've brought this up before. You can do things like go to all the local inner cities of where, like, in other words, Dover and Pocono. You could come to New York. Go to Philadelphia. Go to places where there's a lot of urban youth who need social programs. Something to get involved in where they're not getting in trouble in the streets. Every community has, social programs for kids like this. And as a sport, NASCAR can work hand in hand with these local communities and say, we're going to sponsor 100 kids every time we're in town. And we're going to take them for an entire weekend. God knows there's plenty of fucking available seats for these kids. Take them to the race. Let them experience happy hour. Take them for a tour through the garage. Let them meet the drivers. And I guarantee you that a lot of these kids who don't know anything about NASCAR, if you took 100 kids, I guarantee you could turn 25 of them, right? I think you could do better. But if just 25 of these kids, they might look at this and be like, this is fucking awesome. I like this. And then when there's a race on TV, maybe they'll be like, hey, let me watch this. Remember when we went to the race? Hey, I met that guy. I kind of understand what's going on. It's not just cars going in circles. There's more going on. And that's how you appeal and expand. But Brian France doesn't have that foresight. Now, I'm going to bring something else up, and I want you to bear with me. Now, I know you guys don't, I've respected one of your wishes, which was, I told you guys I am interested in talking about other things, like social and political commentary, things like that. And the reaction I got was pretty negative. People are like, we don't want to hear that. And guess what? I've respected that. So I'm not going to do that. But in this particular instance, I'm just going to dig into it just a little prick. Well, Brian France doesn't have time to promote, to help expand NASCAR. But he's got plenty of time to go around the country and stump for Donald Trump. To show up at rallies, to tell everyone what a big supporter he is of his very close friend Donald Trump. Well, I don't have anything against somebody, you're conservative or whatever. I'm not, but I'm not going to hold that against them. But here's a problem. Some of this stuff is I'm going to see it a certain way, whether you think it's fair or not. But as a Hispanic, okay, of Dominican descent from the city of New York. This isn't NASCAR country, right? I'm a minority. I look at someone like Brian France and I see his passion for supporting a man like Donald Trump does not make me feel welcome. Now, I'm not telling you that he's a racist because he supports Trump. I'm not going to go there with it. I'm not going to get that deep into it. I have my own personal feelings about it, but out of respect to him and everybody who probably doesn't want to get into that deep into it, I'll leave that out of it. But can you at least understand why someone as controversial and unpopular, right? Yeah, Trump is popular with his base. But outside of that base, he's extremely unpopular. Why would you, as a CEO of a major corporation or sport, put yourself in that position where you're telling the world, Trump is a close friend and I'm a huge supporter and I'm going to show up at rallies and support him, with all the controversy and all the minority stuff that comes with this administration? Wouldn't you, even if you were a friend and supporter, wouldn't you just keep that to yourself just as a CEO? I'm just talking about common sense. You would say, this doesn't look good. We want to appeal to a broader audience. You know, we already have NASCAR looked at by a lot of people as a southern white sport. That's always been the way it's been looked at. So why would you in 2018 not be more smarter about the things you say and do? But apparently he has plenty of passion to put himself out there for a man like Donald Trump, in spite of the fact that this can hurt the growth of NASCAR. Now people who don't feel comfortable with that, if you are a minority or someone, why would you even think about NASCAR? This just kind of cements that. Now, you might not think what I'm saying is fair. I don't know what to tell you. That's how I feel. That's my opinion. And I do think that NASCAR has a long way to go. They need to do something about expanding their base of fans and viewership. You know, you might not like what I'm saying, but the facts don't lie. Look at the fucking empty seats. Go to a NASCAR race. And it's a sea of old white people. And I don't mean for it to sound like that. This isn't an attack on anyone. I'm just saying that's the demographics. If we're just talking demographics, it's mostly retired white folks who grew up and were born into NASCAR. You cannot survive as a sport if that's all you have. These people are going to die eventually. Who's going to replace them? They're not doing enough. I don't have all the answers on how to fix the sport, but I can tell you one thing. This proposed plate package that they're talking about from the All-Star race that they're talking about bringing to a bunch of races next year, that's going to be the final nail in the coffin. And I warned everybody about, after the All-Star race, all these fucking people that were raving, we need more of this, and I fucking told you guys. And there was, I don't remember who it was, somebody I'd never seen before, but I saw a video and he was raving about the All-Star race and he was telling everyone how this is what's going to quote-unquote save NASCAR. And I said, you fucking moron. We don't need more restricted plate racing. We don't need more pack racing. I thought the idea of these races were to make the cars harder to drive so that the driver's skill and the skill of the crew chief and the crew on adjusting the handling of the cars, that's supposed to be what decides the races. Not a fucking package where everybody's lumped in these packs and you're wide open around the track, and then you put this tapered spacer that takes out all this horsepower, so you slow the cars down. You're making the cars easier to drive. It's fucking insane. I'm not going to get into it. I did a video on that after the All-Star race. You guys can check that out. Go to my channel and just look back at my old videos. Go back to the All-Star race video I did. I fucking told you guys this thing is going to be a nightmare. So right now it's just a proposal. I hope that somebody with some fucking sense just says, no, we're not doing this. Because that's going to be the final nail in the coffin. Nobody is going to like that. Now you're seeing a lot of backlash. But after the All-Star race, I saw a lot of people saying good things about it. So, again, what the fuck? Where's Brian France on that? You know, I hope that the powers that be have the good sense to fire Brian France, because he's given you everything you need on a silver platter. It's time to send him packing. And if Brian France ever happens to stumble onto this, you know, it's not the end of the world to say, you know what, this isn't for me. My heart's not in it. And I think we're better off leaving it in the hands of someone who has the same passion for NASCAR as a sport as my grandfather and father did. This isn't for me. That would be the best thing he can do. And there's no shame in that. But to stick around and everyone in the world can see Brian France doesn't give a damn about NASCAR. His interests are somewhere else. Maybe he can devote himself to 100% following Trump to all of these fucking ridiculous rallies. He's got all the time in the world then. But get out of fucking NASCAR, man. Let someone else take over. Somebody with a little vision. Somebody who understands that the key to survival for NASCAR as a sport is to expand and make the sport appealing to everyone. And maybe you'll get, you know, more people showing up, and a younger crowd, and a more diverse crowd. It's dying right in front of our eyes, and it's sad. And I feel sorry for Bill France Sr. and his son, who did inherit the sport, but he was young enough. I mean, he was there when his father was still running things, so he understood, and he had that same passion, and he understood how his father, he understood his vision. But now you're 2 generations down to the grandson. You know, this is the world we live in now. You got a man in the White House, another guy that inherited everything he had, and he thinks, you know, another guy that thinks he's responsible for everything that's ever been built, and he's just living off the legacy of people that came before him. And this is the world and the country we live in now. And you see it. These are the people running the country, and they're all born on third base and think they hit a triple. I did not come up with that. I do believe. I think Barry Switzer. I think. Don't quote me on that, but he was the coach for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think he coined that phrase one time. He said that, you know, this guy thinks he's born on third and thinks he hit a triple. Well, these people are born into wealth, and they're given these positions high up the ladder, and they walk around like, I did this. You didn't fucking do this. Someone else did it, and you inherited it. And I don't know. It's pretty bad. I hope someone has the good sense to say we got to get rid of this guy for the good of the sport, because it's gonna come crashing down. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to your comments. and hopefully we get some news on NASCAR Heat 3 soon, and I could talk about that. So, you know, I don't know what else to say. So, you guys have a good one, and I look forward to your comments.